Welcome. The submitter of this story mentioned a number of locations, but was not very clear exactly where the action itself took place. When I wrote back to get a clarification, my email was not responded to. I have searched Google Maps for a location that matched this description, but I may be guessing wrong as to where this is supposed to have happened, in terms of the visual we present during the video, which we are calling. I saw the cops battling Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, my friends and I once saw several Dogmen, or else we all hallucinated the same thing at the same time. We have no pictures to compare to our memories, so all I can tell you is the way we remember it going down. We do all agree about what we saw, but none of us really thinks it makes very much sense. We don't want our names attached to it either because it's a fairly way out there kind of story. Nevertheless, like I said, we're pretty sure we didn't imagine it. So I've grown up with two best friends who I'm going to call Cheech and Chong, just for private reasons. Cheech is shorter than me and Chong is much taller, but other than that, they don't really resemble the famous comic duo in too many ways. We used to hang out in the area around Carroll Beach or Phil Sanders Park, near the Chilwaukee Prairie State Natural Area. This is just barely still in Wisconsin. It's very close to the northern border of Illinois. So the night we were hanging out was only I think maybe a week after all that stuff went down in Kenosha. You know, the bad stuff from 2020. Kenosha is only like a few minutes drive north of where we were, okay? So that kind of stuff was still on our minds. And we were trying to just chill by ourselves, but enjoy the late summer air. We weren't on a beach over there, but we were sort of hanging in the darkness of some trees by a little fence just next to a beach. It was nice though. We could look out onto the shore and watch the waves coming in over and over, but we didn't have to get sand in our shoes, since we were standing in the wet dirt on the other side of that fence, under the tree cover. Cheech was just saying that no matter how crazy the world gets outside, the three of us always seem to find the eye of the hurricane for ourselves. As if fate itself decided to start an argument with my friend. A police siren made a brief, blaring noise, which shook us up and got our collective attention. We each grabbed a spot where we could peer through the trees and vegetation across the beach toward the dark end on the other side, where there were now bright, blaring lights around the small house or shack that I had not noticed prior. It looked like there were several official-looking law enforcement-type vehicles parked there, but they didn't have the colors of our local police force. I wondered if they were state or federal, or where else they might be from, or working for. There was one main uniformed guy, wearing some kind of an attachment to his headgear that might have been a light, sort of like a miner's lamp. It might have been something else though, as this was a ways off, and it wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. Like I said, he was in a dark uniform with stuff on it that I did not recognize. Behind him were two more men, wearing helmets, holding some kind of a dark buffer or shield in front of them. It reminded me of the things that home plate umpires used to wear a long time ago, like 50 years ago. These men were approaching the shack, and the leader with the headgear spoke into some kind of a device, which amplified his voice like a loudspeaker. The mysterious law enforcement man informed whoever was in that shack that they had 1 minute to come out in a non-aggressive manner. I remember the terminology specifically, in a non-aggressive manner. It wasn't with your hands up, or any of that sort of thing. It was in a non-aggressive manner. They weren't asked to put their weapons down either. Everything that happened seemed stranger than the thing that had just happened before it. So the guy with the loudspeaker waited a few seconds. Then he started to give his speech again, when the door of the shack exploded outward, and this mountain of brown fur erupted forward out of the door. Not only did the three of us watching jump up in the air when that happened, but I swear, the three strange officers over on the other side of the beach, they leaped up and backward as well. I wouldn't be surprised if their vehicles jumped and screamed also. It was such a surprising thing when it happened. This was one of those times when things happen so fast that you change your mind about what you're seeing 5 times each second for about 10 seconds until your brain starts to put all the data together and you realize that it's not 1, but it's 3, maybe 4 large, hairy, dog-headed yet upright creatures that you just witnessed burst from a small, temporary-looking corrugated metal building that didn't seem large enough to have contained even one of them. Almost as soon as the creature men emerged from the shack, something over there started causing a lot of smoke to envelop the fight. I don't know what that smoke came from. Maybe the ground was just dusty and the scuffling stirred up the dirt, but it seemed far more extreme than just that. Possibly some kind of weapon or weapons were being fired that we couldn't see, as we were not exactly very close to the action to start with. I'm going to try to write down everything that the 3 of us noticed about the look of the canine men now, and then I'll get back to what happened between them and the cops, or the feds, or whoever those other guys were. So the dog-headed men, they really were wolves. I've seen wolves up close, and that's what these were. Only these were really smart wolves. They knew how to stand up, and they knew their rights, too. They walked upright, and they did it with a swagger, you know. They didn't toddle along like bears trying to keep their balance. They moved fast, and with grace and strength. They stood tall when need be, and towered over the law enforcement. Then, they crouched down and got right in the faces of those poor men. No matter how good the training of those men might have been, it was clear they had not trained against opponents like these 3 or 4 dogmen. When we later on told Chang's uncle, who is a combat veteran, about what we saw, he started spouting poetry about the fog of war. I'm not smart enough to know what he was talking about, but since then, that's kind of how I think about all that smoke that was obscuring the action down on the other end of the beach. That was the fog of war in a literal sense that time. And he was right. That was a battlefield that we were observing from the side when nobody knew that we were there. The dogmen were tan-colored, or their fur was. They had triangular-shaped upright ears, and they were able to attack using teeth, claw, or any of their 4 paws, which could strike out in kicks and punches and shoves. I don't recall noticing the famous Dogman eye shine, but Cheech claims he saw it during the fighting. There was one dogman who just pounded each successive human opponent with the blunt weapons of his hands and feet, really dog paws in both cases, but large, and wielded in a manner not all that different from how you'd see a top martial artist dispatching one man after another who tried to breach his perimeter. There was another dogman with wild eyes and bright red gums. I can tell you the color of his gums because he almost never closed his lips. That dogman kept trying to bite the men's faces off. I saw him clamp his huge jaws on one man's shielded helmet and tear the front of it off while the guy was still wearing it. There was at least one more dogman in addition to those 2 who were close enough for us to see. The fighting produced more and more smoke and so became less visible as it proceeded. By the time we would eventually leave, we could smell what must have been the smoke, and it was a sweet odor that I had not smelled before, or since. So we don't know what that smoke cover was caused by or consisted of. Although they would eventually begin to hold the line, initially the human side of the fight was not winning anything they were attempting to do. When they advanced, the dogman pushed them back. When they defended, the dogmen just bit right through their defenses, as though they were made of cardboard. I seriously wondered what the heck those creatures were, or where they had appeared from. Something like that could not be native to the area, or else the security force or police or whatever they were would have known what to do with them. In fact, if they were native to this area, then law enforcement would have had generations of experience dealing with them. At the time, the 3 of us assumed it had something to do with that weird election year in some way, although don't ask me how. We also expected this story would come out on the news the next day, and we were wondering how they would play the Dogman part of it. Would the Dogman be described as right-wing or left-wing? But the thing is, there didn't seem to be any press or media there at all, and as far as I know, the story never got any coverage in the mainstream at all. I also didn't see it called into any cryptid blogs. Chong wanted us to call up either Vic Cundiff or Lon Strickler about it. But Cheech and I both still live with our parents, at least until the end of this next school year. We talked him out of going public with it for now, in exchange for us putting this anonymous version together for you. We might still call it into one of those other shows in the future, like when we're in college, or later on when it doesn't seem like it would cause us any problems in our personal lives. Although, to be honest, I don't think that revealing our names and the exact location would really answer too many more questions, since we can't answer most of our own. Like, why were those creatures in that shack? How did these men know that they were there? What exactly were the dog-headed animal men? Who did the human men represent or work for? Were they the police as they appeared? And if so, whose police? Cheech points out that I'm not mentioning the various strange weapons that the men seemed to be using, but I didn't really understand what I was seeing when I was looking at it. It reminds me of this one electrical weapon that did not work like a taser, but in this other way. The weapon was handheld and would shine a bright whitish-bluish light on the intended victim. We could hear the electricity crackling all the way from where we were, and I could feel the air becoming charged. Chong's hair stood on end, like he had stuck his finger in a socket. He's the only one of us who had straight hair long enough to stand up on that night, but I felt a tingle all over at the same time. Meanwhile, all the way on the other side of the beach, that Dogman, who was getting hit directly with the electrical beam, which lit him up from head to toe, well, that Dogman was able to just walk right through the field, his hair glowing all around him. Then he smacked the weapon out of that uniformed man's hand and proceeded to pounce on his former attacker, dragging him down, out of our sight. They had other strange weaponry that we can't remember in enough detail to describe to you, but much of it failed to do any damage at all to those dogmen. It must have been their first skirmish of this type, or the humans wouldn't have brought such useless weaponry with them to start the battle off with. But who were these two factions? Who did the Dogman represent? And who did the humans represent? What was the nature of their hostility toward each other? And why was this battle taking place in my neighborhood, where I like to hang out with my school friends? The discussion between us on our end went back and forth between how we should sneak out of there before we got noticed, and wondering what was actually going on over there. Like, how would those cops or feds or whoever they were, how would they have known that the dogmen were going to be in that little shack? And why did it even matter to them? Another big question I've got is, as I've indicated before, if those dogmen were such high priority, that so many men were sent out into the night to engage in battle with them. Well, why do these men seem to have no idea how to effectively fight these creatures? The first wave and second wave of men were knocked down, and it appeared at first that the dogmen weren't even being slowed or tired out in the least. Then came the line of chain-wielding cops, each of them wearing one of those weird helmets with the strange light attachment on the forehead. As the men flailed their chains in front of them, they kept missing the beasts, and it wasn't even close. The dogmen were able to easily avoid each successive attack, and I didn't understand the logic behind this sort of an approach. There was something going on with those light helmets, though. Something we fortunately couldn't see from our angle, on the side, and down the beach. I started to feel like I was watching a ballet more than a battle, as it felt to me like the men weren't trying to hit the werewolves with those chains. Not at all. It began to seem to me that they were trying to move the chains in front of their faces, in order to get the dogmen to look into those flashing lights up there on their foreheads. It seemed to me that the dogmen were behaving in an increasingly sluggish fashion, but that could have been my imagination. We heard someone that we couldn't see shout something about there being more in the bushes, and we just ran. We thought there was someone mistaking us for more dogmen, and we took off to where we had parked my car. I do not know if the shouting individual was actually talking about us or not, but I'm glad we got out of that situation either way. Even though we hadn't seen enough to understand what happened, we still managed to see a lot more than I wish we had seen. Now, I can't say why the others didn't take any photos, but I already knew better than to take photos when I was out with the guys myself. I knew my mother would look through my phone while I was asleep. I learned the hard way never to take pics if I was at a place that she didn't want me to be at. Mom had figured out how to tell where and when photos on my phone were taken, so I certainly wasn't going to be taking selfies at a police riot, or whatever that was that we were witnessing. How soon do you think she'd let me take the car out by myself again, after my mother saw pictures of Dogman fighting cops on my phone? Probably not till they invented flying cars, like on the Jetsons. Anyway, do people take photos when they see something that looks like a riot? Maybe they do. For their Twitter page or something? Maybe after me and my buddies move out and get our own places, then we might want to brag about being in a place where we could have gotten ourselves trampled or electrocuted or something. I guess it just didn't occur to us to take pictures to prove that we were in some place that our parents would not have wanted us to be. You know, I don't blame you if you cut this next part out, because it's not based on anything but a gut feeling. But all three of us feel like there was something going on behind that incident. Maybe it was related to that weird election season, or maybe it was something else, but I don't think those were animal control guys ridding that property of Wolfman pests. First of all, I don't think animal control shows up in the dark of night to perform its duty, and I don't think they get on the loudspeaker to order the pests to come out willingly. Whoever or whatever those men expected to be inside that shack, it was someone or something that understood English. I mean, they wouldn't have issued their orders in English if they thought they were dealing with dogs. They assumed they were dealing with creatures intelligent enough to know what they were saying to them through that loudspeaker. So who or what did those uniformed men think they were going up against? And why were they taking such a hostile posture toward them in the first place? Those are questions I have no plans of ever investigating to find the answers to. I'm too afraid of what else I might find in the process, and what punishments might be dealt out for people who stick their nose where it doesn't belong. But I sure can't help but wonder about that night, and what it was that the three of us actually witnessed. Honestly, we really thought back then that we'd eventually find out that the Wolfmen were some left-wing faction or some right-wing faction. We were anxious to find out how they looked so much like werewolves. Were those costumes? Were those really not human beings at all? We figured that the press would at least report on all this to lie to us. Like, we were wondering if they say the Dogmen are X, would that mean they were actually Y? But then none of that ended up mattering because it never even got reported, not even on the police blotter. That kind of makes us even more scared to put our real names on this story. Because what if we saw something that was top secret? Or worse, what if those weren't even government people at all, but two different kinds of organized crime fighting each other? What if both sides would have wanted me and my buddies done away with if they had found out that we saw what we saw? That's kind of why I refuse to do any digging to find out any more info. I'm content to just sit and wonder about the night when I saw the cops battling Dogmen. From Ireland and the UK, a gift of £10. The party's not over. Let's share another round. Who is this gift from? Why, it came from him. Which him? Why, none other than Godzilla Tim. Please join us in thanking Godzilla Tim for making this episode possible. Without Godzilla Tim, we never would have made it all the way to 2023. So we can't begin to explain how important he's been to us. We can never thank this gentleman enough. We will always be indebted to him. If you would like to join this great man in helping us to remain online, you can send us one-time donations either by using the Super Thanks button under this and every one of our YouTube videos, or by going to paypal.me/ youtube.com/PeterBernard209. We also have channel memberships where you can get to see secret free episodes. So to fill in all the deets, please check out our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Thank. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.